I proposed to my girlfriend, but her family gave me a list of debts to pay. When I refused, her dad threatened me and she called me selfish. I proposed to my girlfriend, Selena, last week, expecting we would embark on a joyful journey to build our lives together. Yet, within a day of my proposal, her family handed me a list of large, expensive items they wanted me to pay for on their behalf. When I refused, Selena called me selfish, and her father threatened to harm me physically. I ended our engagement shortly after, shaken by how quickly the love of my life and her relatives had turned on me. Here's the entire story. Before we dive into this intense story, we have a small favor to ask. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far our stories reach. Thank you so much. Now let's dive in. My name is Aaron, and I'm 30 years old. I'm an only child from a comfortably middle-class family. My parents, Thomas and Deirdre, both worked in higher education. My father as a professor of engineering, and my mother as an associate dean for student affairs. Growing up, I never lacked support or guidance, but my parents also drilled into me the importance of independence and responsibility. They had never pressured me for money or put me in a position where I had to take care of them financially. Their philosophy was that each person should strive to be self-sufficient and only accept help when absolutely necessary. Selena, my now former fiancée, comes from a large immigrant family. Her parents, Carlos and Marisol, moved to this country in search of better opportunities. They settled in a working-class neighborhood and struggled with various obstacles, language barriers, long stretches of unemployment, and issues with addiction that sprang up as they tried to cope with their harsh realities. Selena is the eldest of 6 children, which made her the de facto role model and financial backbone of the family from an early age. During our relationship, Selena was forthright about sending money home every month. She always mentioned how she had to support her parents' bills or help her siblings whenever they fell short on rent, school fees, or even personal loans. From what she told me, her siblings were either too young to hold steady jobs or too inconsistent to maintain their own finances, so the weight of her family's livelihood often fell on her shoulders. Given my upbringing, I found this level of responsibility startling. My parents had never expected a dime from me, and I was taken aback by how often Selena's family would come to her for help. Despite my misgivings, I tried to keep an open mind. Different families handle finances differently, especially in an immigrant household where looking out for one another can sometimes morph into draining each other. Still, I respected Selena's choice. If she wanted to give her money away each month, it was ultimately her decision. Whenever I suggested she set firmer boundaries, she insisted I didn't understand her family's cultural expectations. Over time, I let it go. Selena and I dated for 2.5 years. During that period, I did my best to be a supportive partner. Because I came from a comfortable background, I often paid for our outings, restaurants, date nights, even her salon visits for her hair or nails. This wasn't because Selena forced me to or even asked me to. I simply enjoyed treating her well. Call me old-fashioned, but I believed I was showing love and gratitude, especially given how stressed she often was about her family's needs. From the very start, my parents liked Selena. They admired her strong work ethic and commended the way she looked out for her younger siblings. However, they were slightly concerned by how much she was expected to do. They worried I might get pulled into that cycle. Whenever the topic came up in family discussions, I'd assure them that I wouldn't be paying for Selena's family in any capacity. I was confident we'd maintain separate financial boundaries. I had no idea how quickly that assumption would be shattered after I proposed. Earlier this month, I decided to propose to Selena. We'd had our ups and downs, of course, but overall, we were happy together, or so I believed. I spent a long time researching the perfect ring, asked a close friend to help me choose something special, and finally took her to a beautiful park near a lake we frequented. There, I got down on one knee and asked her to be my wife. She burst into tears, said yes, and hugged me. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. When we returned home that evening, we talked about wedding dates, possible venues, and whether we'd have a large or small ceremony. I felt like I was living in a dream. Little did I know that dream would unravel by the next day. The morning after our engagement, Selena told me that her parents wanted to invite us over for lunch. She said they were thrilled about our engagement and wanted to congratulate us. I thought it was a sweet gesture, so I happily agreed. My main worry was whether I should bring flowers or a bottle of wine for Selena's mother. I wanted to make a good impression, given that we were now officially headed toward marriage. We arrived at her parents' house around noon. The atmosphere was subdued. Selena's siblings, Jonas, Teresa, Alonzo, and Valeria were there, along with one more sister named Marina, who was visiting from another state. I expected excitement, a warm celebration for the newly engaged couple, but no one looked particularly celebratory. Instead, they seemed oddly focused, as if waiting for a serious discussion. We sat down in the living room, and her father, Carlos, wasted no time. He looked me in the eye and said he was pleased I wanted to marry Selena, but he needed reassurance that I was capable of taking care of her. I replied that I loved Selena dearly, and would always support her emotionally and financially as my partner. He nodded, but said he had a list of items that I needed to address. Carlos took a folded piece of paper out of his back pocket and handed it to me. I assumed it might be a modest list of wedding customs or some cultural traditions. However, as I read it, my eyes nearly popped out of my head. The list included paying off their house's mortgage, which from what I knew was tens of thousands of dollars behind, settling an older loan they had taken out years ago for a family member's education back in their home country, funding an extensive renovation of their kitchen, which they claimed was long overdue, buying them a newer model SUV so they could fit the entire family comfortably, providing a lump sum of money for emergency family expenses they anticipated in the coming year. Carlos then informed me that this was just the start. He expected that I would continue to help them regularly because that's what a good son-in-law does. I remember looking up at him, thinking he must be joking, but his expression was unwavering, and Selena was uncharacteristically silent. I asked very calmly if this list was serious. Carlos assured me it was. He spoke as if this were the most natural thing in the world, explaining that since Selena had always been the family's biggest contributor, it was now my job, as her future husband, to take the lead. He even added, with a casual shrug, that I made a decent living, so these items shouldn't cause me much hardship. I looked at Selena, expecting her to laugh it off or correct her father. Instead, she avoided eye contact, saying nothing. Finally, I asked, "Selena, do you really agree with all of this?" She mumbled that she didn't see it as an unreasonable request. "It's normal in many families, especially ours, to expect the man to step up. You know how much I've done for them all these years," she said. "This is just part of being married." My stomach churned. We had never once discussed me assuming her family's debts and financial responsibilities. I understood that marriage involves supporting each other, but the notion of single-handedly taking on massive debts for people who had never even been kind to me was unfathomable. Over the last 2 years, I had grown tired of how much they demanded from Selena, but I had always thought it was her personal choice. Now it seemed they were trying to corner me into being their cash machine. Unable to contain my shock, I told Carlos there was no way I was doing any of those things. I was marrying Selena because I loved her, not because I wanted to bankroll her entire family's life choices. At this point, Marina spoke up, chastising me for my selfish attitude, insisting that since I had a good job and stable parents, sharing my resources was the right thing to do. Selena's brother, Alonzo, chimed in too, arguing that as a man, I should have no problem showing I could handle serious responsibilities. Their words infuriated me. I shot back at Alonzo, pointing out that he was also a grown man, so why wasn't he covering some of these expenses himself? He looked offended and replied that it was never his job because Selena had taken on the role. Now that I was in Selena's life permanently, I was the logical successor to those duties. I turned to Selena, demanding to know if this was her plan all along. "Why didn't you ever mention any of this to me?" I asked, my voice cracking with anger and hurt. "If you were honest about your family expecting such enormous financial commitments, I would have told you right then and there that I am not going to do it." Selena bristled, telling me I was out of line and speaking with ignorance about her family's struggles. She tried to defend them, pointing out that they were immigrants who'd had a tough time building a stable life. She said it was only right that I help lift them out of poverty, since I had the means. When I labeled this entire setup as an attempted scam or gold digging, the living room exploded with shouting. Carlos stood up, furious that I had used the term gold digging. He yelled that his daughter wasn't a gold digger, but a hardworking woman who had sacrificed everything to keep them afloat. He maintained that asking for my financial help was perfectly normal in their culture. Marisol started shouting too, accusing me of being a snake for turning my back on them after promising to marry their daughter. Selena, visibly distressed, began to cry, blaming me for overreacting. She said I was putting too much emphasis on money and ignoring the fact that, in her eyes, family should always come first. Her siblings started calling me names, and I felt my blood boil. I insisted that I had no intention of letting them walk all over me. Yes, I was marrying Selena, but I had my own life, savings, and future to protect. Taking on the entire family's financial burdens was out of the question. At that point, Carlos grew confrontational. He said if I broke Selena's heart by refusing to marry her now that I'd proposed, he and his sons would deal with me. The thinly veiled threat sent my adrenaline through the roof. Feeling cornered and betrayed, I took a step back. My voice shook with anger as I told Selena, if your definition of marriage requires me to become a walking checkbook for your entire family, then I can't be the husband you want. I said our engagement was off and that she needed to look for someone else who was willing to sign up for this arrangement. I then asked for the engagement ring back. Selena had wanted an elaborate diamond ring, and I had spent more than I initially planned because I wanted her to have something special. But with no wedding in sight, I saw no reason for her to keep it. She clutched the ring protectively and refused, tears streaming down her face, calling me insensitive for asking at such a painful time. Her siblings berated me, saying I had promised to marry her and now I was backing out. They asked if I would abandon my own fiancé over a few small financial tasks. Their audacity left me speechless. These were huge financial commitments, not trivial tasks, and it was never part of any conversation we'd had over our 2.5-year relationship. I told them all that I had never made such promises. Carlos stepped closer, raising his voice and reminding me of what he had said, that if I didn't do the honorable thing and stand by Selena, there would be consequences. Furious but resolute, I informed them that if they dared lay a finger on me, I would call the police and file charges. Despite Selena's crying and begging, I left that house and ended the engagement right then and there. I couldn't believe how a single conversation could destroy years of what I thought was genuine love and mutual respect. All the while, Selena pleaded for me to reconsider, saying I should just take some time to think it over, and that eventually I'd see it wasn't such a big deal to help out her family. But I saw it for what it was, a manipulative guilt trip orchestrated by a family desperate for a financial savior. I drove straight to my parents' home, where I spent the rest of the day in a daze, replaying the scene in my mind. Shock, betrayal, anger, sadness, they all washed over me. My parents were horrified by what they heard. I recounted every detail, from the mortgage demand to the new car and the threat of violence from Carlos. My mother broke down in tears, devastated that I had been so thoroughly blindsided. My father was furious, already preparing legal options in case they tried to harass me further. In the weeks following my decision, I have had minimal contact with Selena. She sent me several messages, some apologizing for her family's overreach, others defending them by saying they were simply desperate immigrants who had nowhere else to turn. She insisted that I was making too big a deal out of it, accusing me of being heartless for not understanding their struggles. From her point of view, my refusal to help was proof that I lacked empathy for the hardships her parents and siblings had gone through. I did not respond in detail, except to reaffirm that I was done with the relationship. A marriage built on such deception and unilateral financial demands wasn't a marriage I wanted. I regretted the wasted years, but at the same time, I was relieved I discovered the truth before legally binding myself to them. As for the ring, Selena continues to hold on to it, and I decided I'm not going to start a drawn-out legal fight just to get it back. If she truly believes she's entitled to keep it, that's on her conscience. In my view, the ring has become a symbol of the entire fiasco, a cautionary tale of how quickly apparent love can turn into outright greed. Looking back, it feels surreal that I could have been so close to tying the knot with someone who, in the end, valued my ability to pay her family's bills more than the genuine bond we had. While I still feel a pang of sadness for the loss of the woman I once believed I'd spend my life with, I know now that I dodged a bullet. My parents and friends have rallied around me with support, reminding me that genuine partnership isn't about forcing one partner to shoulder massive burdens for external relatives. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this.